I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency!
Thanks, losers.
And we're back here for the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. Welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's staying safe, staying healthy out there. As always, I'm Bob Lung from Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Always here to talk consistency in fantasy football. And sitting on the other side of the glass, as always, or at least 90% of the time, is our good friend Ron Rigney. Ron, how's it going out there?
Going good. You know, we dodged the hurricane here.
Oh, yeah, right.
Not that we were going to get anything on this side, but the funny thing about it is, usually when these things happen, there's more talk about it. But with just the way the year's been going, I think pretty much everybody kind of looked at it and was just kind of like, oh, it's something normal.
Oh, look.
Good, yeah.
Oh, look, murder hornets.
Murder hornets, you name it, it's happened. But yeah, hurricane happened.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. For some reason, they're too worried about Bill Clinton being a pedophile or going to some island or something. I don't know what the hell's going on. I just saw that on Twitter today. I'm like, what? Oh, God. All right, fine. So anyway, we don't care because we're here to talk about fantasy football, which is the most important thing anyway. And the second most important thing is how important consistency is in fantasy football. And this week we do our tight end look at review, preview kind of thing. And in the past, and it's funny because I've done obviously lots of other podcasts with people who've invited me on to talk about fantasy football consistency, and it seems like every time we get to the tight ends, you get the eye rolls, the ughs, the here we go. But you know what? Here's something that I put in the fantasy football consistency guide, which of course you can get on Amazon, out there and available. And one of the things I showed was over the last 4 years, so from 2016 through 2019, there has been a 67% increase in tight ends who have earned over more than 200 fantasy points in a season from 3 to 5. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. And a 500% increase in tight ends who have had a 65% consistency rating in that year. So we went from just two in 2016 to 11 in 2019, and that doesn't even include the guys who have had 65% in the past, like Jack Doyle and O.J. Howard and Eric Ebron, who, okay, maybe those two don't hit it, but Jack Doyle certainly has a chance to get back to that level of 65% or higher, maybe even 70. So, consistent, to me, this is the year where you can wait on tight ends and get a decent guy in the sixth round or higher. I'm getting guys like Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram. There's Hayden Hurst. There's Jack Doyle. There's Jared Cook. So there's all kinds of good quality, consistent tight ends, I think, available this year that you haven't seen in the past. So, Ron, what are your thoughts on tight ends if you've done some of these drafts, whether it's, Scott Fishbowl, and obviously you get into the weird scoring that certainly floats things around quite a bit if it's a 1.5 PPR for tight ends or 2 tight end leagues. I've done some of those. So how have you approached tight ends so far from your perspective?
Top guys early. I got, a lot of shares of Travis Kelce and some of the best balls I did early. But, I used to call tight end the catcher of fantasy football, and I don't want to call it that anymore because as I've dived into this a little bit, I actually did a little bit of, dynasty research about tight end last week in a piece I had to write. And I'm comfortable with some of these guys really far down the list. I'm looking at our consistency rankings here, and I'd be okay, I think, all the way, maybe even down to number 19 on this list, which I don't know if I've ever felt that comfortable about tight end. But I'm with you. I'm getting kind of going away from, getting the Kelce's and the George Kittles of the world. And I'm going to maybe back off a little bit and wait on some of these guys that are a little bit further down my board, and I'm going to be perfectly fine with that.
And I think the other thing, too, is if you're doing any best ball leagues, you could wait late and get maybe 2 or 3 of those guys, as you mentioned. Like you said, the Austin Hoopers, Jack Doyles, Gronk, Higbees, Cook. Even guys like Ian Thomas, Hayden Hurst, Noah Fant, Chris Herndon, just a couple years ago when he was fully healthy, was having a pretty good year consistency-wise with the Jets. So there are, I think, a lot better depth than we're used to. And so, if you get Kelsey in the first couple rounds, you're certainly getting the best. No argument. And points-wise, yes, he is, but is he worth 4 to 8 rounds difference? Maybe, maybe not. So, all right, so let's go through our tight end preview. And in Tier 1, I have Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and the aforementioned Evan Ingram. I love Evan Ingram. His consistency last year was 88% in those first 8 games that he played. Obviously got hurt, missed the rest of the season. The knock on him is health. I get it. Can't argue with it. But if he stays healthy, he is going to be, in my opinion, he's one of the elite tight ends in fantasy, and he will be 75% or higher because of the, relationship he has with Daniel Jones in those games when he was playing, which were the first 8 games. Remember, Daniel Jones got hurt, and then Eli came in the second half of the year, but Ingram was out. What are your thoughts on these top 3? Are you a Darren Waller truther? Do you believe he should be up there? What are your thoughts on Tier 1?
I think I'm fine with where we have it. I'm okay with Kelsey and Kittle. You're giving up that draft capital, but you like you said, you know what you're getting. The only knock I have with George Kittle is, he does have a tendency to be nicked up a little bit, but, he's shown, and Pro Football Focus gave him, I think, the highest grade of any tight end overall that they had last year. Of course, Travis Kelce, I said I ended up with him in a lot of places. I'm perfectly fine with that as well, but you're giving up, yet again, those top picks. Evan Ingram, you're not giving up. His ADP right now is right around the 6th round.
Right.
You're getting a guy that could potentially be our 3rd-ranked guy, or if he was able to put a full season together, he might surpass Kittle or, maybe even be number 1. Who knows? But I'm okay with where it's at, and I think that the thing with that Giants offense is I think it has a chance to be really sneaky good. I think that receiving core, we talked about it a little bit last week, nobody stands out as being truly great, but I think they're all pretty good. They got a really good guy in the backfield named Barkley. I think he fits right in with that, and for a second-year quarterback like Daniel Jones, maybe he'll become that check-down option and be that PPR goldmine that we're looking for. Well,
and the other great thing is that they get to play, 6 games against the Cowboys, the Redskins, whatever their team name is, the Washington Professional Team. Is that what they're called?
Like the Washington Football Club?
Football team. I don't know. Something like that. Anyway, I'm calling them Redskins. I don't care. The Redskins and the Eagles, who, defensively not that strong. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of points scored in those games. So I just love Evan Ingram. If you look at his total points, if you would just doubled them from last year, which, again, we played through 8 games, that would have been 219 points. That's only 3 points away from George Kittle's total last year. So definitely would have put him right there at number 3, or at least damn close. Waller was 3. Well, he would have been 4th. Anyway, needless to say, definitely worth the pick. And like you said, going to the 6th round, 7th round, he's just not getting a lot of love. So definitely have no problem with that. We move down the list. Tier 2, just so many good tight. I don't really argue with any of these guys in here of them being on my team based on their current ADPs. Cook, Doyle, going a lot later. Hooper is not getting any love, which, again, going to Cleveland, I kind of get. Ertz not going as high as he has in the past, so he's and he's going at a respectable spot. ADPs is somewhere around, I think, 407, 405. It's respectable, but not super high. Darren Waller's also in that 4th round. Certainly put up a lot of points. Consistency, okay, 69%. Ranked him 7th in consistency, so not super high, but certainly not terrible. Definitely put up the points. Mark Andrews had some really good games, but also had some clunkers as well. Like I said, love Henry, 75% consistent. Missed 4 games last year. Again, he stays healthy. He can be a stud. What are your thoughts on this group? Anybody stick out here that you either in on or shying away from at this point?
having. The only thing, I guess, maybe Gronk a little bit, just because of all the offensive weapons they do have there in Tampa. But he is Tom Brady's boy. He is a freak athlete. He seems a lot older than what he is. I think he's only 31. I was kind of surprised by that the other day. So I'd be okay with him. But you mentioned Darren Waller before. I think going into this season, one of the offenses that I think is really going to be improved is that Raiders offense. With Josh Jacobs in the backfield, they added some speed on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Waller did it last year. Is he going to be the guy the defense is key on a little bit? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I like Mark Andrews here a lot as well. I was able to have him paired with Lamar Jackson in a couple places. The thing I like about Mark Andrews is he produces when he's in there. And, like you said, he wasn't necessarily our most consistent guy. And his numbers are a little bit deceiving because when you look at how many games he played in 15 games. But a few of those games, he disappeared because he was hurt and trying to play through it, and it didn't really work out too well. But one of the things that proves he does it when he's in there, had 98 targets and only suited up for 60% of the offensive snaps. So that tells you right there, if he's in there, Lamar Jackson's looking for him. But as you move down the list a little bit, there's a couple guys I don't really have a whole lot here, but I'm with you on Hooper. Hooper's going super, super late. I wouldn't be upset with any of these guys here that are on my team as long as the price is right, to be honest.
Let's talk a little about a guy that I feel like has been really polarizing this year. Let's say from the end of last year, and the guy I'm talking about is Tyler Higbee, and here's why. So I look at him as ADP is early, late round 7, early round 8, respectable, get it. The funny thing was, I remember the end of last year when he put up, 8 or 9 straight clutch games, and pretty much carried some teams through through the championship. And all you heard was, at least all I remember hearing was, how brilliant these guys were for, getting Higbee, and what a stud he's going to be in the future in LA. And, he's going to be a top 5 tight end. I remember hearing all this crap. All of a sudden, I don't hear this stuff. And I see him, as, tight end 8, 10, 7th, 8th round. But I've been doing some drafts with experts. So I did the Flex League draft on Saturday. Tyler Higbee was like the 14th tight end picked in round 12. And Michael Fabiano, our good friend, picked him, and he didn't even want to, but he said, it's not that I forgot about tight ends. He said, I just didn't want Tyler Higbee because he goes, I already had Robert Woods and Cam Akers on his team, and he didn't want another Ram. But he was in the 12th round, or is that what I said, 12th round or 10th round? He goes, and I figured I have to pick somebody, and he's the only guy that's really worth anything. So it wasn't like Fabiano was bragging about the fact that he got Kyler Higbee in the 12th round. He was just like, I have to take him now, and I don't want to take him because I don't want 3 Rams in my starting lineup. But so, that's what's interesting to me is I've heard a few people get beyond the bandwagon. I think the Ball Blast girls are all over Higbee. But beyond that, some of these, analyst draft, experts drafts, whatever you want to call them, I'm not seeing the love for Higbee that I heard nauseously through the preseason and the summer. And now when, you got to put skin in the game and you're drafting, I'm seeing Higbee going a lot later. What have you seen that, or is it just like maybe I just noticing that because we're talking about tight ends? But boy, I remember this Higbee thing. Like I said, Fabiano was like, oh God, I don't want to pick him. But the guys after him were guys like Jack Doyle. Now he obviously wasn't in Jack Doyle. I'm sitting there going, I'd wait 3 more rounds to take Jack Doyle. But, but Fabiano was like, I got to take this because it's the only guy, top 12 tight end that's left. No, it's his opinion. But what are your thoughts on Higbee?
That's the thing is, I guess it proves the point where, we can talk about how much we're not on a bandwagon for a guy, but when they get to a certain value, I think you kind of have to jump on board with it. And, his value that I have pulled up right here, he's like pick 8-1. So, if you're getting him in round 12, I think that's great value.
Right.
But I don't think that you can expect those freak games like we had in the last season that did carry
Right.
people to league titles as well. I think if you, maybe this is kind of a cop-out answer, but if you can expect something kind of in between, and he's, right now the 9th tight end off of the board, I could see him finishing as the 9th tight end at the end of the season. That's
right.
Not really all that out of the question, but I could also see him maybe leapfrogging guys that are going a little bit ahead of him. You got guys like Evan Ingram, Rob Gronkowski, Waller going ahead of him. I could see him maybe slotting in, a couple spots above that, but I'm not going to get crazy with it here.
Yeah.
Over Tyler Higbee.
Like I said, I look at Higbee where he's at, and the reason I don't have him is because if it says I can wait around later and take Hunter Henry, that's what I'm going to do. Ingram's going in is early 7th. So normally if I get to the 7th and Ingram's still available, I'm going to draft Ingram. And if not, I'm probably going to take Hunter Henry. Hurst is one of those where I've heard great things, but on the other hand, until you see it happen, it's hard to buy into. It's like, how many years did it take Austin Hooper to become the stud in Atlanta? And yet every year you heard Matt Ryan rave about Hooper's talent. And, somebody was talking in the Flex League draft about Hayden Hurst, and I think it was Fabiano, and he said that he was interviewing, I don't know if he was interviewing Jared Goff or somebody from NFL Network was interviewing somebody, or not Jared Goff, Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan was just raving up one side and down the other about this talented Hayden Hurst kid and, his physical ability and blah, blah, blah. And, and I said, well, he raved about Austin Hooper for 4 years too, but he only really paid off fantasy-wise one of them. So, that's where it's kind of like, Hurts I could see Hurts being a top 5 tight end if Matt Ryan uses him as much as he did Hooper last year. But
and I think too we've kind of made our own argument for the position as well, talking about where Tyler Higbee's going. I think if it's me, and I think you kind of feel the same way, you just kind of said it with Hunter Henry. If I'm getting to the 8th round and I don't have a tight end yet, I'm going to wait. I like some of these guys after Tyler Higbee, and I like him a lot better at that price point at round 12, round 13, 14. I can either go with one of those guys that I like that's, a little bit more under the radar, or I may go with a couple of guys even further down and just play matchups if I got enough room on my bench. But when I get to that point, if I don't have that tight end around 8 or 9, I'm going to wait a few more rounds and see what's going to be left out there. Right.
And like you said, especially when, so as, we move down into, the next level of players in tier 3, it's not a big tier, but Gesicki, Goddard, Jonnu Smith, Ian Thomas. That all very solid, all, certainly have been, good players. Jack Doyle we've talked about, but he was up in tier 2. Gesicki kind of came on at the end of last year, certainly proved he was worthy, or at least looked like he was, was starting to be used in the offense. Now, we just don't know how much Fitzmagic's going to be playing versus Tua, but let's assume Fitz plays at least half the year. I could see Gesicki being very valuable in that first half, and maybe after the fact too. Goddard is the one. Here's another one that's been intriguing. I tell you, let's go back to Gesicki. What are your thoughts on Gesicki, and would you draft him as your starter, or do you feel really good about him? I feel really good about him as my backup.
I like him as my. I don't know if I'd say I feel really good about it, but if I'm getting down to that round 12, 13, 14 range, and he's there,
right?
Based on the way he finished last year, because I didn't realize, when you look at his overall body of work, 51 grabs, 570 yards, 5 scores. That's
right.
Pretty solid tight end numbers. And in 6 of the final 8 games last year,
right.
He had 4 grabs. So that means they've kind of started to figure out how to use him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I like that heading into the season. I like, maybe him building that rapport with whoever's in their quarterback. So I think I'd be okay with him as my starter. I wouldn't expect Kelsey numbers, but I think I'd expect a little bit of a bump over what he did last year. For sure.
But if you're going to wait that long, are you going to let me put these two in front of you? You're in round 13. You can pick Gesicki or you can pick Jack Doyle, because Jack Doyle's ADP is 1402. Who are you picking?
I'm going to take Gesicki. I'm going to go against my fandom.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Put my man crush
All right.
Boy.
All right. Yeah. Now against Jonnu Smith versus Doyle, Blake Jarwin. Obviously you're going to go probably Doyle, but let's look. This one's I really didn't notice how far Dallas Goedert had fell till I see it here, and I noticed it in the Flex League draft yesterday. Goddard. I don't even know if Goddard was even drafted in that league. Maybe he was near the end because I took Doyle as my backup after I took I think it was Hunter Henry. No, it was Ingram. I took Ingram in round 7. Because the funny thing was Eric Young, if you know who Eric Young, the big time wrestler, is it WWE he's in? Eric?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
I don't follow.
Yeah. So I don't either, but he's always in my flex league every year. Last year I sat beside him in New York. This time he was picking in front of me. But anyway, I was actually live on the air being interviewed by Bob Harris and Dempsey and those guys, and they said, "All right, Bob, you're coming up on your pick. What are you going here in the 7th round?" I said, "Well, to be honest with you, I'm going either Evan Ingram or Hunter Henry because I want to get my tight end, and I just feel like both of these guys." Have great consistency, always have proven it, and I'm getting them, in round 7. I said, so I'm going to take one or the other. They said, well, who are you going to pick if you have both available? And I said, I like Ingram more, but Hunter Henry, I said, Ingram's injuries is worse. Injury concern is worse than Hunter, and then Eric Young picks Hunter Henry right in front of me, so I got Ingram, which is fine. But then, like I said, I took Jack Doyle in like round 15 or 16. But I was shocked because when I looked at it, Dallas Goedert was still there too. And I'm like, it's like Goddard was 67% consistent. He tied Zach Ertz last year consistency-wise. What do you think everybody's down on Goddard? Did they just forget about the fact that he was, a pretty decent, tight end, needless to say? Right.
I fear, and they're going to have to, I think, use both of them, and they do use both of them in the offense. And his numbers were essentially almost exactly what his were. So I don't know, maybe it's just because people are scared off because of Zach Ertz, or maybe they don't trust Carson Wentz or whoever his backup is. I don't know, but you're getting some solid numbers there for basically free. He's basically free money at this point.
Right. And, and here's the thing with consistency for those who, obviously aren't looking at it as in depth as Ron and I do. And you brought up a good point. Total points last year. Now, Goddard played one less game than Gesicki, but total points, there was only 10 points difference between the two of them. Gesicki ends up 12th in total points. Goddard ends up 10th. But Gesicki's consistency is only 31%. He had half the clutch games. So basically what Goddard was doing was he was getting about 10 points a game on average, let's say. Because, if you look at it, 10 points a game would have been, in 15 games, would have been 150 points. So he was just making it over that 8-point limit for tight ends. So he wasn't setting the world on fire in any game. So everybody just kind of forgot about the fact that, I'm sure some people look at it and are shocked that he was even in the top 10 in total points. But it was because he was consistently getting you about 10 a week. Now, obviously, that may or may not win you a championship or even get you to the playoffs. But for a guy that you could get as your backup, and if you're a week or you're really struggling or your tight end goes down, at least you're going to get probably 10 points a week out of him, 10 to 12. So
that's one of the instances as well. If you have room on your bench and you have Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert.
Absolutely.
If you've got the room.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, it is a no-brainer, especially to get him that late. And the funny thing was, if I remember, early in the year, like back in May, I think Goddard's ADP was much, much higher. So it feels like he's just kind of forgotten about. Like I said, I was surprised when he's still available when Jack Doyle was available. I'm used to Jack Doyle being available in the 14th round. Every once in a while, I've been in a league where somebody has taken him in like round 10, and I even will be shocked to make some comment about, whoa, Jack Doyle lover. I go, I thought I was the only guy that liked this guy this year, and whoever it was would be like, no, you just 3 years ago he was really good. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. I'm very aware of this. Yeah, Goddard falling that far. And like you said, perfect backup. That's what I've been doing. If I have, as long as there's enough bench, if there's only 6-player bench, you're probably not going to draft a backup tight end. But, I think in the flex league, we did 18 rounds. So there was an 8-person bench. And there was no kickers. So that was nice. So you basically drafted one defense because you probably didn't have to, you're not going to draft 2. So you had basically a seven, person bench. So you get your couple running backs, a couple receivers, and a quarterback. You still got 2 spots left. So, like I said, I went after Doyle just because, if Doyle does kick it up like a notch, like we expect, he might be my second flex or a trade bait or something in that league. But anyway, okay, so that's where we're at with Goddard. Jonnu Smith, man, again, he's one of those guys that's kind of I used to kind of always think he would be a really good replacement, obviously, when Delaney Walker moved on. But I think that was because Delaney Walker was used so much by Marcus Mariota, and Jonnu Smith wasn't used that much by Ryan Tannehill after Delaney got hurt. I just don't – I haven't drafted him as my backup at all. And that's what I think he's worth as a backup. And there's some people that, obviously are, creating their own Kool-Aid, I'll say, for Jonnu Smith. I don't see it. I didn't see any really stretches of consistency where I can say, oh yeah, last 3 games he was all in. They just kind of used him sparingly. Do you have any love for Jonnu?
Not really, because I don't know if I necessarily trust Ryan Tannehill just yet. I mean, he put together a nice little streak down stretch, but I don't know if I trust that pass offense yet. And based on where he's going, 13th round, I'll wait, and maybe in that round, that vicinity, I'll get Jack Doyle. Dallas Goedert might be there, so I might wait on another one of those guys that I trust a little bit more. But I'm not a huge Jonnu Smith guy just yet.
Yeah.
Plus, too, there's been a couple times where like you said, Walker's been hurt, and we're putting him in. He's the hot waiver pickup, and he doesn't do anything. So
right.
I think I've gotten burned by him too many times as well as part of it.
I hear you. All right, so the last one in our tier 3 is Ian Thomas. This is just one of those where he seems to be in, he's kind of like Hayden Hurst. He's a talented guy who's had some flashes of success in the past when he got to be the main guy when Greg Olsen would go down. But then Greg Olsen was healthy all last year, so he didn't break out like a lot of us expected him to. Again, as much as I like Ian Thomas and would love to have Ian Thomas as my backup, Jack Doyle is always available. So I just haven't had a chance to get Ian Thomas because I'm like, I'm going to take Doyle, because I know what I'm getting there. We all have I think you and I have a man crush for Thomas. It's just that I haven't been in a situation where I needed 3 tight ends in my league yet. So I just haven't done much with him. Any thoughts on Ian Thomas and whether or not he may end up on any of your teams?
I actually have him as my backup on quite a few.
Oh, good.
Again, he costs you nothing.
Right.
You can get him most of the time with your last pick, or you might even be able to wait and get him off waivers wherever you're at. But a couple things I like about him, I like the fact there's new coaching staff coming in. You've got Joe Brady coming in, who was LSU passing game coordinator. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to light it up like LSU did last year, but I think that bodes well for everybody on that offense, that he's the guy who's going to be calling the plays. Week 12 on last year, Ian Thomas had 25 targets over those last few games, which that's kind of encouraging. They actually looked his way. When you look at the beginning of the season last year, he had virtually no targets, and Greg Olsen is gone.
Right.
So I kind of like, I think it's kind of a perfect little story. He's going to be solid. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think he's right what you said he is. He's a nice backup, bye-week fill-in. You have your main guy get hurt. He's a great guy to step in. Don't expect huge numbers. And I think a lot of times, too, a lot of weeks when you throw him in there, he is going to be touchdown dependent. But I think he's a big target. He's an athletic target, and I think you're going to look for him quite a bit in the red zone. Well,
and another thing you didn't mention, I'll mention, is the change of quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater is definitely a captain check-down kind of guy. He likes to throw the backs, likes to throw the tight end. That's what he did last year in New Orleans when he filled in for Drew Brees. Jared Cook has some pretty successful games through that time frame. So definitely like that scenario as well. Again, it's not that I don't want to draft Ian Thomas, just haven't had that opportunity. As we look down the rest of the list, kind of outside of those three tiers, there's definitely a few names that are intriguing. And again, if you're in a super deep league, or I did the, what's it called? Yeah, Pros versus Joes, which is a best ball format, 28 rounds. You load up a lot of players. So I think in that one I did do some, I think I might have done 3 tight ends because you had, a one. You could definitely load up, and you want to get some different players. I think Ian Thomas went, but I'll tell you the guy who I drafted in that league that, may be a surprise. So O.J. Howard had been drafted, but I drafted Cameron Brate. And I don't have any data to support it. I don't have anything that, really get put up in front of people. But I feel like if Gronk gets hurt, which we think he will, because he kind of always does. That back never seems to hold up. I think Cameron Brate could be a favorite of Tom Brady before O.J. Howard would be. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that. Somebody there is going to have to step up. I'm still not convinced that they won't trade O.J. Howard when he gets close to the season. I think if they make a move with anybody, it's going to be him, however the preseason plays out. We have, obviously we're not going to have preseason games, but just
right.
How camp goes and things like that. I think O.J. Howard could be the one that can get him the most return because I think he's the better athlete of the two. But I think kind of like you mentioned with Bridgewater, I think Cameron Brate's that perfect captain checkdown guy. And I think, we've seen with, in the past with what Tom Brady does with multiple tight ends, with what he does with slot receivers. And I'm kind of with you on that. And he's another one that I don't even you got to go pretty far down on the list here to even find Cameron Brate's name on some lists. You can't see him. So
right, exactly.
I think he costs you nothing, so why not?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've been kind of noticed, really have thought about as well is, again, it was my third tight end, a very deep best ball format league. My thought was if Gronk gets hurt, because he always seems to get a back injury at some point, second half of the season, Brate could be a guy that might pull you through in a best ball format. Some other guys on the list, and we got about 12 minutes, so we certainly got plenty of time to go through this. But there's definitely guys out there. So let's go to last year's rookies. I've seen these guys all over the board when it comes to ADPs, actual drafts, that kind of stuff. And of course, I'm talking about the two boys, Noah Fant, T.J. Hawkinson. ADP for Fant, tight end 12, Hawkinson 14. I have him in my rankings at numbers 18 and 19, respectively, just because obviously I have guys like, Doyle that are much higher, Goddard much higher. So, that's why they're a little bit higher in the ADP that we're looking at versus not. Do you have any love for either one of these guys? I just can't get on board. I really can't. I mean, I think it's just because of the offenses. We've got a veteran like a Stafford who never has used his tight end. He had Ebron for years. Really just never has been a part of his repertoire. And I think as long as Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay stay healthy, I just don't see him throwing it to Hawkinson that often. And Noah Fant, you got Drew Lock, a little bit different scenario. You got more of a younger quarterback, closer to a rookie quarterback. But again, had him all last year. Locke didn't use him that much in the second half when he was the starter. So any love for either of these two guys, I just don't. I can't seem to muster anything up that makes me feel like, oh yeah, okay, I could buy into Fant because of this or Hawkins because of that. I just can't.
I like both of them, the prospects in dynasty format more than
okay, all right.
my backup, but I think the athleticism of both of them. I mean, there's a reason they were both first-round picks. I'm with you a little bit on what what you said with the Lions and how they use their tight end. However, the thing about Hawkinson last year is he came out of the gate in his first game, 6 grabs, 131 yards, score, and that's pretty much all we heard from him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, to be fair, Matthew Stafford was hurt. You
Mm-hmm.
in the Lions passing game, so that might have affected him a little bit there. Fant's the same way. I mean, they're both young guys. We don't expect a ton out of rookie tight ends. It very rarely happens that we see that translate over early on. And they were just both they were the opposite of what we do here with consistency. They were the definition of inconsistent last year.
Mm-hmm.
I like what the Broncos did with that offense, and I think that's going to make Fant a little bit better. So I think I have a little bit more love for him than you do, but it's definitely going to be more of a dynasty format for me to pick one of these guys or both of them. But they're definitely, if they were going to be on my team, they would definitely be backups. I wouldn't feel comfortable starting them.
Right. No, definitely dynasties. Good thought process as well. All right, some other guys that are going very late, but are basically the starters for their team, have shown some flashes in the past for different teams. Well, one for different teams. Let's talk about Eric Ebron, Chris Herndon. They're both going to be starters for their team. Ebron will share, I guess, with Vance McDonald. I think he's still there. But they paid him a nice chunk of money to come to Pittsburgh, and I would assume be their starter. Herndon, like I said, a couple years ago, really had a nice rapport going with Sam Darnold, but then missed all of last year just about. What about those two guys? Any love? I mean, obviously Ebron had a phenomenal season the one year in Indy with Andrew Luck with all the touchdowns, but kind of fell back to reality when Luck was gone. Any love for either these two guys as your backup? Obviously, probably not as your starter as you look at 2020.
I mean, if I'm going to roll the dice on either one of them, it'd probably be Herndon, just because to me Ebron has a longer body of work and it really hasn't been all that impressive. He did have that 1 year where he was basically touchdown driven, that he scored all those fantasy points with Andrew Luck. He scored 13 touchdowns that year. But that's kind of the season that stands out a little bit. He's always been that 500 to 650 yard guy. Not really all that flashy. Now, I realize Chris Herndon has done even less to kind of compare, but also he hasn't been in the league as long, and he was kind of useful a couple years ago. I mean, he did have a little stretch there where he scored you a few touchdowns, had over 500 yards, and I believe that he missed all of last year for various reasons. He was suspended. I think he was hurt, and then that was kind of it. So maybe he'll be a little bit fresher coming in, but I think he's more of the wild card of the two. But I think I would roll the dice on him if I'm going to pay any kind of money for either one of them. I just don't trust Eric Ebron to do a whole lot of anything. I think the upside with Herndon's a little bit higher.
Got it. Yeah. No, and I think, like you said, the key was the Ebron sharing probably with McDonald. We assume they'll both be on the field, where Herndon doesn't really have any competition, at tight end for the Jets. All right. We got about a little over 5 minutes, about 6 minutes left. Let's talk about this guy, and I kind of just caught my eye because and I'm going to tell you why. So who I'm talking about is Blake Jarwin. Outside of Tyler Higbee, I think the second most polarizing guy that I've seen all over the place, love, hate, in between. We have him. What do we have him? Tight end 28. On here they have him tight end 17 in round 14. But no disrespect to our good friend at CBS Sports, Jamie Eisenberg. But when we were talking about tight ends and Tyler Higbee and that whole thing the other day, I think Jarwin got picked after, obviously, Higbee did. And Eisenberg said, quote, "I have Jarwin in my top 10. Now, I'm pretty sure I walked away from the computer at that point during the live Zoom, so I could laugh out loud in the hallway. Again, no disrespect to Jamie, because hey, he has a job with CBS Sports, and well, we don't. So, they added CeeDee Lamb. Maybe if they don't add CeeDee Lamb, I'll give Jarwin certainly some more opportunities, some more targets. But now you've got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Zeke out of the backfield. I just don't see how Jarwin gets to be anywhere near the top 15, let alone 10. Heck, top 20. I mean, last year he was 28th in total points. His consistency was 3. I mean, he played all 16 games, and he was 28th in total points. If he gets top 20, it's a huge improvement. And here, Jamie Eisenberg, a big shot for CBS Sports, has him in his top 10. Am I missing something?
I mean, I love the size, 6'5", 260. I mean, I like the offense he plays in, but the problem is, like you said, the amount of guys in that offense that are going to require the football. I mean, he's been around for 3 seasons, and he really only got on the scene in 2018. 2018, 2019, he has a total of 77 targets, 58 grabs on those. So
wow.
He's not, and like you said, they have 3 receivers that are going to demand the ball. They've got coming out of the backfield. Tony Pollard's another guy.
Yeah.
Gets the ball well out of the backfield. They have a ton of weapons that I don't think Blake Jarwin outranks any of those guys. So of all the guys that I've named, he's number 6 in the pecking order right now.
Right.
That said, I think he's a great guy to take a flyer on in case they have an injury, and he might step up and get a few more targets that way, if one of the receivers goes down. But top 10, if I'm looking at the guys we've got in our top 10, if I'm looking around number 9, 10 range, let's see who we've got here. I don't believe he's going to be better than Higbee, Doyle, Hooper. I'm not putting him anywhere near the top 10. I think
No.
we find where we have him at 28.
I'm not even sure I could put him in the top 15 for sure. Maybe the top 20. Maybe, Ebron doesn't pull through or, one of those guys. But, man, I just, yeah. He said when he said that, and I think I saw some shock look on some other people's faces, but, and nobody, really obviously disrespect him because we don't do that. But, yeah. So that was an interesting conversation, and that was live Zoom. So if you go on The Athletic and find yesterday's Zoom draft, you can hear it for yourself. There you go. You don't have to take my word for it. But anyway, so tight ends, as we said, definitely some consistency there, more than we've had a lot in the past. So, don't, if you want Kelsey, fine, go get him. That's fine. Like Ron said, I've done it. I've drafted Kittle. I've drafted Kelsey. A lot of times it's the 2-3 turn where, one of them falls to me and I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I could pull this off. Maybe I go, I think the one draft, I think it did have 1.5 PPR for tight ends, but, I went, I had the number 1 pick. So I took McCaffrey, came back with, Leonard Fournette as my second running back, which I love. And then I took Kittle just to see what I come up with. And I like my team. I think I came back, and got good quarterback. I think I got Prescott. Maybe it was Kyler Murray. I've been taking a chance on Kyler Murray once in a while. But. All right, so we got a little, about a minute and a half. So Ron wants to tell everybody what's going on. There's baseball being played sometimes. Sometimes. So, and I think you guys have been, if I'm not mistaken, you're on the move, right?
We got some big news. I don't know exactly what the future holds for us with the NastyCast and Fantrax Dynasty Pod. Our guy, Nathan Dokken, has moved over to Roto Fanatics. He's hosting podcasts over there, their flagship podcast, and doing his writing over there, so he's moved on from Fantrax. Not sure what that means for Mr. Van Lee and myself, but we are going to soldier on. We're going to put some kind of baseball pod out there because we love doing it. And I don't know what it's going to be called at this point. We got a lot of conversations that have to happen. But this week, Tuesday, will be Nate's kind of farewell on both of those pods. So make sure you check those out. We wish him well. Check him out over at Roto Fanatics, and we'll follow Twitter. Look for us there, and we'll tell you what's going on. But we definitely got something up our sleeves.
Well, I think if it makes sense, your last Nasty Cast should have Bob Lung and the Consistency Guide on it, don't you think?
I think that'd be a great one.
I think it would be a fantastic idea. Have them look into that. But as always, thanks, Rod, for being here. Did you tell him Twitter at The Real Mod Day? Of course, you can find me at Bob_Lung. Big Guy Fantasy Sports is the site. And don't forget, get your fantasy football consistency guide. Your draft's going to be coming up this month. time. As always, everybody have a great week. Stay safe.